Thank you for joining me on this session in the investment track called See the Future, Plan to Win. I also want to thank our sponsors. Without their support and their partnerships with us, these conferences, virtual or not, would not be possible. So thank you so much to the sponsors for your support, your guidance, and for your coming together with our solutions to deliver even greater value to you, our users, and our clients. Hello, my name is Eric Kogan. I'm the Vice President of our Finance and Investment Solutions Group here at MRI. I've been with the company for over 10 years, and I've been in the industry for about double that time, with specific expertise in property accounting, investment accounting, investor relations, financial planning and analysis, managing debt, and property valuations. Now, let's look at today's agenda. I want to start by talking a little bit about the global real estate market in 2020. Then look at 2021 planning and beyond, and what that means to both us as a software vendor and to you as a real estate investor. A recap of smart, nimble experiences and what that means for finance and investment. And then finally, a few solution highlights that are a teaser to some of the specific features you're going to see and hear about in some of the other sessions during the conference. So let's talk about the global real estate market in 2020. Of course, we know that this year was defined by the COVID-19 pandemic. And there are so many different impacts that we could talk about for hours on end as it relates to specific asset classes, specific regions, specific strategies. But I want to focus at a very high level on core assets, because there were some interesting trends as it relates to core assets that I want to talk a little bit about in terms of technology and the role it could have played. Core assets like offices and retail malls were of course impacted negatively by COVID-19, and so we saw market value drop, up to 30% globally within these asset classes. Apartments and hotels also dropped in value, and the only types of assets that really benefited from the pandemic were storage facilities, data centers, industrial warehouses. On the transaction side, we saw a significant reduction in transactions. So we weren't seeing a lot of buying and selling of offices and malls, whether it's strip malls, large retail malls or other. But then when it came to apartments and hotels and these industrial assets, we saw a significant increase in transaction volume. So what can we make of this? Well, the transaction volume not being down across the board does make sense. The pandemic didn't necessarily reduce the amount of capital that was available to be deployed in the market, and interest rates were extremely low. So getting financing for these transactions was certainly an appealing proposition. And a lot of private equity firms were looking for low value distressed assets that they felt were going to bounce back quickly post the pandemic. So how do we define what's going to bounce back? What's an opportunity because the value is lower? Why are some assets actually improving in terms of value? Well, I think it comes down to one thing, and that's these folks that you see on the screen in front of you. It's the human element of the pandemic. Offices and malls were dependent on high volume human interaction. High footfall in retail malls, high occupancy in offices. And similarly, apartments and hotels were also dependent on this human interaction, this high density human interaction. And so that explains the drop in value. Similarly, assets that did not require a lot of human sort of interaction and engagement, like data centers, warehouses, storage facilities, their value increased. Transaction volume, though, is interesting because even though offices and malls were lower in value, they were not being purchased. And that means that investors did not feel that those types of assets were going to bounce back quickly in the post-pandemic world. Similarly, apartments and hotels dropped in value, but they were being purchased quite aggressively by a lot of real estate firms. And that's because they viewed those assets as being something that would bounce back rapidly post the pandemic. So it's this human element that really contributes to these trends. And they are trends impacting core assets that are quite unprecedented. And the reason for that is that the human element is unpredictable. And so we want to talk a little bit about that. But let's dig into what that human element is looking forward as we plan. Humans are going to work from home. We will also shop online. So that's going to have a significant impact on offices and retail malls moving forward, and investors can see that. And when we don't stay home, when we do work in an office, when we do shop in a physical mall, we're going to be expecting health and safety more so than ever before. Sustainability is a big factor today, and the experiences that these visitors and residents and tenants expect needs to be at a much higher degree of quality in order to make the effort of leaving their homes worth their while. So that human element is not only something that impacted the real estate market in 2020, but it also will impact how we look forward and plan our real estate portfolios. So let's look at planning and beyond in 2021. Technology wouldn't have predicted the human element component of 2020. The pandemic is simply too much an unprecedented occurrence. But there are so many other factors that are predictable, that do have some underlying logic and repeatability and cyclical natures of things that technology absolutely can help us with. So when we think about planning in 2021, so sustainability in the environment, social media, all of these are new data points that we need to factor into our consideration. And so with more factors, more variables, more data points, it becomes increasingly important to leverage technology to make sense of all that data. We also want to make frequent, confident, data-driven decisions. In the past, you would have problems on two sides of the coin. One is getting the data to the point where you can actually leverage it to make decisions. And the other is being able to then make those decisions quickly enough to navigate an ever-evolving and fluctuating market. In the past, this wasn't as much a consideration because the cyclical nature of the real estate market was a little bit more predictable. But today, we see technology and social concerns changing the market much more rapidly. So we need to be able to make decisions more quickly. And finally, the strategic analysis that we do that ultimately drives those decisions needs to also be foolproof and swift so that we can make those decisions confidently and quickly. So these are things, these three factors, the big data component of things, the need to do swift strategic analysis, and then ultimately make quick decisions are what are driving our vision, our plans, our roadmaps for our products. And that leads us to the concepts we've been talking about a lot during this conference, smart, nimble experiences. What does smart, nimble experiences mean in terms of finance and investment specifically? Well, it means that data integration, aggregation, and normalization is something that we want to do efficiently. When it comes to accounting, We want to make entries, make adjustments, close our books, reconcile our accounts more quickly and in a more automated way. We want to make the budgeting process more intuitive, more efficient with intuitive budgeting tools. We also want to make sure that performance forecasting, the forecasting the performance of your assets and your portfolios, and allowing for stress testing to see the impact of various things happening to those performance metrics. We want to make that a quick process as well. And after all this is said and done, we want to ensure that reporting on all of this is comprehensive. We want to ensure that the outputs of all those processes are integrated into other departments and other companies that you work with in a very seamless, quick, foolproof way. And finally, we want to leverage artificial intelligence to deliver more predictive analysis, right? So that during this strategic planning process, you're not having to redo and re-input and reanalyze things that are fairly repetitive, fairly logical, and fairly predictable. So let's break down the specific capabilities that exist today and are coming in the near future within MRI's solution suite that help to deal with some of these factors. Let's start with data. Robotic process automation, RPA. You've heard it talked about a lot, I'm sure, in both this conference and the market as a whole. We leverage RPA today in our data management service. It's essentially a white glove service that gives you a hands-off experience with your data. We collect the data from both departments internally or third parties that you work with. We normalize that data into a single data structure, and we publish that data into your solutions so that you can just log in and start reporting and analyzing and doing your work. We also have import-export tools that are evolving and being enhanced on a regular basis to make the import and export of data from disparate systems and to disparate systems a much easier and less error-prone process. So our web import-export that you'll hear about during this conference for our PMX solutions not only imports and exports data, but it also delivers validation and feedback and errors and adheres to securities and permissions. So that gives you an import-export experience that really is no different from a business logic perspective than entering the data manually into the system yourself. When data entry is required, we want to make sure that it's an easy, modern, automated process. So fewer clicks, more straightforward user interface and workflows, and better validation and transparency as you're going through that process. Now we've collected the data, it's available to us. We want to plan, we want to strategize. So how do we go about that? Well, operational budgeting is a significant area of focus for us, or has been in the past 12 months. Enhancements to our B&F solution to ensure not only more efficient property level budgeting, but also the ability to do more capital planning and portfolio level assumptions that feed into those property level budgets. Current and future valuations. We are in the process of launching a web-based valuation solution that not only will produce current and future valuations, but will also feed the outputs of those into your accounting system in the form of unrealized gains and losses, and feed into your performance reporting solutions in the form of time-weighted returns, IRRs, loan-to-value metrics, and so on. Hypothetical waterfalls is a new addition to our investment accounting solution. So those of you involved in partnerships can at any point in time see how a transaction would impact your performance and your partner's performance as a result of that transaction. And then finally, sensitivity analysis and scenarios. These are capabilities that already exist in our investment modeling solutions, and as we look to introduce more predictive analytics, this is the area where we will be focusing on to ensure that those aspects of scenario planning that are repetitive, predictable, logical, can be more automated by the system. And this is an interesting area for us to consider, because there are things that we know we can consume. We can consume market data, benchmarks and indices, market rents. We can look at historical trends. We can understand that the cyclical nature of the real estate market is going to do certain things to interest rates, valuations, transaction volume on a fairly sort of cyclical basis. So we can take a lot of this information in and automate those inputs, not to force you to make a strategic decision in any particular way, but to give you a lot of that legwork so that you can decide what you want to tweak and how you want to move forward. And finally, reporting and insight. We've collected our data, we've done a lot of our strategic analysis. Now we want to make all of this information available to key stakeholders, investors, and other groups within our own organizations. So data analytics and business intelligence. Our analytics solution is our executive level view into all of your data and all of your analysis, so that they can see exactly what is moving the needle in their business today and in the future. Operational dashboards, equally visual and intuitive, but for operational day-to-day business processes, whether it's our financial dashboards or our asset management dashboards within Investment Central. These are intended to give you quick, easy access to the data points you need to analyze, and also identify outliers and exceptions that you need to consider. Dynamic KPIs. Our debt management solution, for example, now has dynamic KPIs. Metrics like outstanding total principal balance, weighted average term to maturity, weighted average interest rates. These metrics are not only available at the forefront of your landing page, but they're dynamic. So as you filter and sort and group your loans, you'll see those metrics adjust dynamically in relation to that filter. And then finally, centralized configurable reporting. Our solutions today are integrated with Report Gateway, which means that you can access reports from multiple systems in a single place. They are reports that are SSRS-based or other types of formats, so they're visually appealing. They have runtime settings, so you can pick and choose your filters, your groups, whether it's a portfolio, a project, an entity, a lender. And you can also blend data from multiple sources into single reports. And from an investor perspective, we've enhanced our investor reporting capabilities to publish investment accounting reports and other reports directly into Report Gateway and then directly into our investor portal. So that was a high-level view of what are the things that we're doing today in terms of data, in terms of visualization, in terms of strategic planning, and how that correlates to what happened in the market in 2020. We know that the human element made it clear that some of the things that are usually very predictable, like what is going to happen with core assets over the next 5 years, has been impacted greatly by the human element, something that only another human being can really foresee and strategize around. But technology is critical to enabling users to make those strategic analyses and make those decisions quickly. And that is making sure that you don't have to deal with the data problem, making sure that you can see that data clearly and gain insight from it, and ensure that based on that insight, you can make the strategic decisions quickly so that you can ensure the maximum performance and valuation and returns for your investors or stakeholders, even when the market is fluctuating and even when, God forbid, another pandemic hits or another pandemic-like event occurs to the market that couldn't have been easily predicted, even by technology.